The Echo, a state-of-the-art human stealth ship, silently drifted through the vast expanse of space, its sleek, near-invisible design making it nearly impossible to detect. For 6 years, it had remained hidden in the orbit of an alien planet, watching, listening, waiting. The crew aboard, led by Captain Elena Torres, had grown accustomed to the quiet tension of isolation. They had no contact with the outside world, no communication with Earth, and no support beyond their own resources. Every day was a delicate balance of maintaining their cover while keeping a close eye on the alien race known as the Varthex. The Varthex were ancient and technologically advanced, their civilization spanning centuries, their reach across the galaxy vast. The Echo's mission was simple but critical: gather intelligence, stay undetected, and report back. However, as the days dragged on, the weight of the mission began to wear on the crew. The isolation was getting to them. Some of them whispered about how they missed the sounds of their home planet, the comforting hum of everyday life. Others wrestled with doubts, questioning whether they were truly making a difference or if their time in the shadows had been in vain. Captain Elena Torres, however, remained unwavering. She understood the importance of their task better than anyone else. The Varthex were not a race to be underestimated, and whatever humanity needed to protect itself, it would have to do alone. There was no room for error. She often found herself standing in front of the ship's large viewports, staring out into the inky blackness of space. The planet below was quiet, its cities and sprawling metropolises hidden from view. The Varthex didn't suspect a thing, or so it seemed. One evening, as Elena paced through the ship's command center, the ship's chief communications officer, Lieutenant Marcus Shaw, suddenly spoke up. A slight edge of panic tinged his voice. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, pointing to the data streaming across the display. Elena moved quickly, her heart rate rising. Shaw had found something, a strange surge of activity. The Varthex, as always, were using encrypted channels for their communications, but something was different this time. It wasn't just routine military chatter or diplomatic discussions. This was something far more urgent, far more intense. Elena leaned over the console, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data. The Varthex central government was sending and receiving messages, but there was an odd pattern, a cryptic back and forth, which didn't seem to match their usual codes. Worse, it was directed at a faction that hadn't been detected before. Unknown, unfamiliar. This couldn't be just a diplomatic issue. Elena's instincts screamed that it was something far more dangerous. "Are we certain this isn't a glitch?" she asked, her voice low and firm. "Positive, Captain," Shaw replied, his face tense. "It's a secure channel, and it's not coming from any Varthex we've tracked before. This other faction, they're as secretive as the Varthex themselves." Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Something wasn't right. She'd been trained to recognize patterns, to spot shifts in behavior, to sense when something was off. And this was off. The Varthex were preparing for something big. But what and who were they talking to? As she stared at the data, she felt the weight of their mission press heavily upon her. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence anymore. It was about survival. "I want every piece of data we can get on this transmission," she ordered. "Track it, analyze it. I want to know who they're speaking to and what they're planning. If the Varthex are up to something, we need to know exactly what it is before it's too late." The crew got to work, running algorithms and decoding the encrypted communications. Hours passed in tense silence as everyone on board worked feverishly to understand the true nature of the messages. Elena sat in her chair, eyes fixed on the holographic displays, her mind racing. Every theory she had, every scenario she considered, suddenly seemed insignificant. This was different. This wasn't just a simple military operation or political maneuver. This was something bigger, something that could change the entire galaxy. "Captain," Lieutenant Shaw spoke again, his voice strained. "We've decoded part of the message. It's about a weapon. Something ancient, something powerful." Elena's pulse quickened. She stood up abruptly. "A weapon? What kind of weapon?" Shaw shook his head. We don't have enough to go on yet, but it's clear the Vartheks are making preparations. Whatever this weapon is, it's capable of catastrophic destruction. A chill ran down Elena's spine. She turned to face her crew. We can't wait any longer. If they're preparing for something that could threaten us all, we need to act. Now, the sense of urgency was palpable. In the quiet of their hidden ship, the crew of the Echo felt the weight of what was at stake. They weren't just watching anymore. They were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something they might not be able to stop. The moment the signal was fully decoded, the crew of the Echo felt the weight of its meaning sink in. It wasn't just another routine message from the Vartheks or any political communication. It was something far more urgent, a distress signal, one that had been sent by an entirely different alien race, the Stari. The Stari had once been an advanced species, thriving in their own part of the galaxy. But centuries ago, they had been enslaved by the Vartheks, their entire population brought to its knees. For generations, the Stari had been oppressed, their knowledge and technology suppressed. Most thought the Stari were no longer a threat, that they had been wiped out or rendered insignificant. Yet this signal told a different story. The Stari, despite their centuries of subjugation, had managed to send a message from the far reaches of the galaxy, a message that had been lost and forgotten until now. It was a cry for help. Captain Elena Torres read through the decoded data with growing concern. The signal contained detailed information about a hidden weapon, something the Stari had created long before their fall to the Vartheks. This weapon, if reactivated, had the potential to wipe out entire civilizations, obliterating everything in its path. The Stari had buried it to keep it out of the wrong hands, but now it seemed the Vartheks were on the verge of uncovering it. Elena could feel the gravity of the situation tightening around her like a vice. If the Vartheks activated this weapon, it wouldn't just threaten the Stari, it would endanger every species in the galaxy, including humanity. The crew gathered in the ship's briefing room, the silence heavy as they processed what they had just uncovered. Elena's mind raced. She turned to her officers, the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. We can't just sit back and watch this unfold, she said, her voice firm. If the Vartheks reactivate this weapon, it will be the end of us all. We have to stop them. But how? Lieutenant Shaw, the communications officer, stepped forward. Captain, the Stari have been silent for centuries. There's no telling what kind of security or defenses the Vartheks have around this weapon. Even if we locate it, getting close to it will be nearly impossible without triggering an immediate response. Elena nodded. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. They were still deep in enemy territory, and exposing their presence could have catastrophic consequences. Revealing themselves to the Vartheks might trigger a galactic war, one they were ill-equipped to fight. But remaining hidden meant they had no way of knowing exactly where the weapon was, let alone how to destroy it. They were at a crossroads, risk everything or remain silent and hope for the best. What if we try to sabotage it quietly? Suggested Lieutenant Juno, the ship's strategist. We know where it is, at least roughly. If we can get close enough without alerting the Vartheks, we could plant a device to destroy it. Elena's eyes narrowed, considering the idea. A silent strike against the weapon, executed from the shadows. It was risky, but it was the best option they had. We can't afford to let them find us. We need to stay out of sight, avoid detection at all costs. If we reveal ourselves now, the Vartheks will go on high alert, and everything will be lost. The crew worked tirelessly to analyze the transmission, hunting for any further clues about the weapon's exact location. The more they delved into the signal, the more they learned about the Stari's desperate struggle to protect the galaxy from the weapon's devastating power. The Vartheks had known about it, of course. They had been searching for it for years. But the Stari had made sure the weapon remained hidden, deep within the Vartheks-controlled territory, knowing that if the Vartheks ever got their hands on it, no one would be safe. Days turned into nights as the crew of the Echo carefully planned their next move. Elena remained focused, her mind sharp and determined. There was no turning back now. The clock was ticking. and they couldn't waste any more time. The Vartheks were close, too close. They would stop at nothing to secure the weapon, and the longer the crew waited, the more dangerous their mission became. Finally, the decision was made. They would act swiftly and stealthily, using every bit of technology at their disposal to remain undetected. Elena gave the order to prepare for their most dangerous mission yet. They would infiltrate the heart of Varthek's territory, locate the weapon, and destroy it before it could be activated. The crew braced themselves to the risk ahead, knowing that this could be their only chance to prevent the galaxy's destruction. They would remain in the shadows, move with precision, and hope that their silence would be their greatest strength. The Echo crept deeper into Varthek's space, its cloaked form moving silently through the vast expanse, undetected but never truly safe. The crew now had a target, the Varthek's research facility located on one of their moons. It was a heavily guarded installation, nestled in a cratered, barren landscape, surrounded by sophisticated defense systems and patrolled by the most elite Varthek's forces. But the crew of the Echo had one advantage: their technology. With their advanced stealth capabilities, they could slip through the cracks, undetected, moving like shadows in the void. They could infiltrate the facility, gather the information they needed, and get out without ever leaving a trace. That was the plan. As Elena and her team began their covert operation, they tapped into the Varthek's communication networks. The encryption was formidable, but not insurmountable. The ship's AI systems, along with their best tech officers, worked tirelessly to break through the layers of security. With each passing hour, the team pulled more and more data from the Varthek's servers. Blueprints of the facility, schematics of its security systems, and classified intelligence about the weapon were retrieved. It was worse than they'd imagined. The Sari weapon wasn't just a doomsday device. It was a relic of unimaginable power, fueled by an ancient energy source that the Vartheks had discovered but couldn't fully control. The more they dug into the weapon's design, the more they realized that if the Vartheks succeeded in reactivating it, no one would be able to stop its devastating power. Elena paced nervously in the command center, reviewing the data. She had been prepared for the weapon to be dangerous, but this was something else. The ancient energy source was unstable, volatile, capable of annihilating entire star systems if triggered, and the Vartheks were dangerously close to unlocking its full potential. The stakes were higher than ever, but the longer the crew stayed in Vartheks-controlled space, the more vulnerable they became. Elena knew they couldn't afford to make a mistake. Every move had to be calculated. Every step had to be perfect. One slip-up and the Echo would be exposed, the crew vulnerable to the full might of the Vartheks military. But as the crew continued their operation, a strange and unsettling sense of paranoia began to creep in. The more they learned, the more they realized how close they were to getting caught. Then, one evening, as the crew worked late into the night, the ship's AI systems suddenly interrupted their operations with an urgent warning. Warning: irregular data transmission detected. Unauthorized access point identified within the ship's internal systems. Elena froze, her heart pounding. The AI system had flagged an anomaly. Someone on board the Echo was sending information outside the ship, possibly to the Vartheks. The room went silent. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The thought was unthinkable. A leak within their own ranks. But the evidence was clear. Someone was betraying them. Elena's eyes hardened. She knew the consequences of such an act. If word of their mission got out, if the Vartheks learned of their presence, everything they had worked for would be destroyed in an instant. They couldn't afford this kind of risk. The tension in the room was palpable, and the crew's trust in each other began to fracture. Who could they trust? Could they trust each other? Was someone playing both sides? The paranoia spread like wildfire. Whispers began to circulate among the crew. It wasn't just the unknown breach in the system that had them rattled. It was the uncertainty of who was involved. As the crew tried to track the source of the leak, they started to question everything. Crew members who had been once close now eyed each other with suspicion. Simple actions, like a misplaced tool or a quiet conversation in the hallway, took on new meaning. Was it a signal? A code? Or was it just the stress of the mission taking its toll? Elena called an emergency meeting. The air was thick with tension as she addressed her crew. "There's a leak," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with an underlying edge. "We need to find it. Fast." The room was silent, each person feeling the weight of her words. "I don't care how we do it," she continued, her tone harder now. "But we're not going to let one person ruin this for all of us. You will report anything unusual to me, no exceptions." The crew nodded, their faces hardening with determination. The mission was more than just stopping the weapon. It was now about survival. They had no choice but to find the traitor before it was too late. Every second spent doubting each other was a second closer to their destruction. Elena felt the pressure mounting as she turned her attention back to the task at hand. The Vartheks were closer than ever to activating the weapon. The clock was ticking, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The sabotage was in full swing, but the stakes had just been raised. Trust was broken, and the mission was no longer just about the weapon. It was now about keeping their ship and crew from falling apart. And Elena knew, deep down, that they had to find the leak, or they would all be lost. The Echo had been operating under the radar for so long that the crew had started to believe their stealth technology was infallible. They had gathered enough intel about the Sari weapon to act. They knew where it was hidden, how it was powered, and the full scale of its potential destruction. Everything was falling into place. But then, just as they were preparing for their final strike, a catastrophic event shattered their carefully built facade of security. The Vartheks had detected a disturbance in their orbit, a small but undeniable blip in their sensor network. It was nothing at first, an anomaly that could have been written off as a glitch or stray debris. But the Vartheks had a vast and intricate network of surveillance systems, and the smallest disturbance was enough to draw their attention. Soon, the alien empire's sensors began pinpointing the presence of an unknown vessel in their territory. The Echo had been exposed, its cloaking systems no longer enough to keep it hidden from their watchful eyes. Elena stood in the command center, her stomach sinking as she stared at the data streaming across the console. "They know we're here," she muttered. Her crew exchanged anxious glances. The silence was thick with tension. But even worse than the immediate danger of being discovered was the realization that their entire mission had been compromised. The Vartheks, however, didn't know the full truth. They didn't know who they were dealing with, or that humanity was behind the intrusion. But that wouldn't last long. And that's when the true betrayal struck, like a dagger to the heart of the crew. Lieutenant Damon Cray, a trusted officer aboard the Echo, was the traitor. Elena had always seen him as an unwavering ally, someone loyal and dependable. But the truth shattered her trust. Damon had been recruited by the Vartheks years ago, long before they even set foot on the Echo. His role on the ship had never been about loyalty to the crew. It had always been about gathering intelligence, about feeding information back to the Vartheks. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Damon had been playing them all along. He had hidden in plain sight, earning their trust while secretly aligning with the Vartheks to sabotage their mission. As the crew scrambled to assess the situation, Damon made his move. Using his access to the ship's systems, he exposed the Echo's location to the Vartheks, sending them everything they needed to track them down. Within minutes, alarms blared across the ship. The Echo was no longer just a ghost in the shadows. It was now a target. Elena's mind raced as the ship was forced into emergency stealth mode. The Echo dove deeper into the atmosphere of the alien moon, hoping to lose any incoming Vartheks forces in the thick layers of the moon's atmosphere. But even as the ship shuddered and dipped into the shadowy depths of the moon's surface, Elena knew they couldn't stay hidden for long. Their cover was blown. The Vartheks were now aware of humanity's presence in their territory, and the war that Elena had feared was no longer a distant possibility. It was coming fast. The crew of the Echo was in disarray, reeling from the sudden and devastating betrayal. Elena stood in the middle of the command center, her face cold with fury. She had trusted Damon, and now they were in deeper trouble than ever. But she couldn't afford to focus on the betrayal for long. They were in a race against time. The Varthex knew they were there. Soon, they would launch a full-scale attack to eradicate them. If they didn't act now, the Echo would be destroyed, and with it, any chance of stopping the weapon. Elena had to make a decision. She turned to her crew, her voice steady but filled with the weight of command. "We can't let Damon's betrayal stop us. We're not backing down. We're still going to stop that weapon, and we're going to survive. We have no choice." The crew nodded, their faces a mix of fear and determination. They had no time to deal with Damon right now. There would be time for that later. For now they had a mission to finish, a mission that had become a desperate race against the Varthex to prevent galactic annihilation. But in the back of Elena's mind, she knew one painful truth: the war had begun, and it was going to cost them everything. With Lieutenant Damon Cray confined in the brig, the crew of the Echo tried to push the betrayal from their minds, refocusing on the task at hand, preventing the Varthex from activating the Sari doomsday weapon. But the calm was short-lived. Just as they were about to finalize their plans to infiltrate the Varthex central facility, a violent shockwave tore through the ship. The lights flickered, and the power grid sputtered, sending a cold chill through the crew. "EMP blast," shouted Lieutenant Shaw, the communications officer, her voice thick with alarm. The Echo's systems were failing. The shields dropped, the power systems malfunctioned, and their communication network was severed. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The Varthex had finally found them. It wasn't just an anomaly anymore. They were under attack. For a moment, all Elena could hear was the faint hum of failing machinery and the frantic scrambling of her crew. The ship was reeling, the once stealthy Echo now vulnerable and exposed. A deep, haunting silence settled over the bridge, the crew frozen in shock. In the midst of the chaos, Elena felt the heavy weight of the situation. They had no time to waste. The EMP blast had done significant damage to the ship's systems. The Echo was limping, struggling to stay in the fight. Elena's instincts kicked in, but the terror that had once seemed distant now felt real, almost palpable. The Varthex knew they were here. It was only a matter of time before they launched a full-scale assault. "Shut everything down. Start manual overrides," Elena barked, her voice cutting through the panic. "Get us back on track. We need to move now." She quickly assessed the situation. The ship's defensive systems were offline, and the communications blackout meant they could no longer call for backup or warn Earth. They were alone, and the Varthex were closing in. Elena glanced at the map of the Varthex central facility, the heart of their operations. If the weapon was to be destroyed, this was their only chance. The team had gathered all the intelligence they needed. If they didn't act soon, the Echo and its crew would be wiped out, and the galaxy would fall into the Varthex's iron grip. Without hesitation, Elena made the call. She would lead a team of specialists into the Varthex's heavily fortified facility. The mission was no longer about surveillance. It was about survival. They had one shot to destroy the weapon, one shot to stop a catastrophic war before it started. The team, comprising Shaw, Juno, the ship's strategist, and Dr. Irina Volkova, the expert in alien technology, geared up in tight, armored suits. Their faces were grim, their eyes sharp with the awareness of the mission's weight. They weren't just spies anymore. They were now the last line of defense between the galaxy and the end of everything they have fought for. Elena led the team into the heart of enemy territory, each of them moving with precision, their every step calculated. The Varthex central facility loomed ahead, a massive structure that seemed both intimidating and ancient. The exterior was reinforced with layers of armor and guarded by the most advanced surveillance systems. Getting in was the first obstacle, but Elena knew this facility like the back of her hand. She had studied the blueprints obsessively. She knew where the weak points were, where the guards would be lax, where the shadows would conceal them. They slipped inside, undetected, using the Echo's stolen data to guide them. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. The halls were quiet, almost too quiet. Elena's senses were on high alert. She could feel the pressure mounting. Every corner could hide a trap. Every shadow could conceal a deadly foe. But they pressed on, determined to complete the mission, knowing that time was running out. The EMP attack had already given them a temporary window, but it wouldn't last long. The Varthex would eventually realize the Echo had slipped deeper into their moon's atmosphere and would come for them with everything they had. They reached the central control room where the weapon was housed. It was even more imposing than they had anticipated, a massive structure humming with the ancient energy source. The blueprints had been accurate. The weapon was exactly where they had predicted. But Elena felt a deep unease settle in her stomach as she looked at the device. It pulsed with energy, its surface shimmering with an unnatural glow. She knew it was unstable, volatile. They didn't have much time before the Varthex would launch the weapon's activation sequence. Elena gave the signal, and the team moved into position. They had to disable the weapon's core, destroy its power source, and do it all without triggering a countdown. The seconds were slipping away, and every noise in the silent room seemed amplified. Every movement felt like an eternity. The mission had reached its breaking point. One wrong move, and everything would be lost. They were no longer just trying to steal data. They were fighting for their lives and the future of every species in the galaxy. Elena's pulse quickened as she watched Dr. Volkovo work on the weapon's control panel, knowing that the next few minutes could determine whether they all lived or died. The air inside the Varthex central facility was thick with tension as Elena and her team pushed deeper into enemy territory. The weapon was close, too close. Every step felt heavier as they fought through wave after wave of Varthex soldiers, each one more determined than the last to stop them. But Elena's crew was just as determined. They moved like a well-oiled machine, using every bit of technology at their disposal to stay one step ahead, hacking through layers of security, slipping past patrols, and blending into the shadows when necessary. They had no choice but to keep moving forward. There was no turning back now. They had already crossed a point of no return. The deeper they infiltrated the facility, the more they understood the true scale of the weapon. It wasn't just a bomb. It was a device so powerful, it could rip apart entire star systems with a single devastating strike. The implications of its activation sent a chill through Elena's bones. If they didn't stop it, the Varthex would have the power to destroy entire civilizations, starting with humanity. Every moment they wasted brought them closer to the end. As they neared the heart of the facility, the team encountered an unexpected barrier. The corridors became more fortified, the Varthex soldiers more numerous and aggressive. They fought tooth and nail, pushing forward inch by inch, and finally reached the core room. The sight before them was enough to steal the breath from their lungs. There it was, the weapon. It was massive, a grotesque contraption of alien technology, pulsating with raw energy, its power humming in the air around it. Elena knew this was it, the last obstacle standing between the galaxy and its destruction. But as the team moved to disable the weapon, a cold voice echoed through the room, freezing them in place. "You are too late." The supreme commander of the Varthex, a towering figure clad in dark armor, stepped forward, his cold, calculating eyes locking onto Elena. His presence filled the room like a storm, and Elena's heart sank. The Varthex had been prepared for this moment. They knew exactly what the Echo was up to, and now they were here to make sure it didn't succeed. The commander's hand hovered over the weapon's launch controls, a cruel smile tugging at the corners of his lips. The battle that followed was fierce, brutal. Blaster fire streaked through the air as Elena's team engaged the Varthex forces, fighting for every second. The Supreme Commander himself joined the fray, his strength and skill overwhelming. Elena could feel the weight of time pressing down on her. They couldn't waste another second. Every move had to be calculated. The commander was close to launching the weapon, and the team's chances of stopping him were slipping away. In the chaos, Elena made a choice. A split-second decision, born from the knowledge that if they didn't act now, it would be too late for everyone. She turned to her team, her voice sharp. "Get to the control panel. I'll hold them off." Shaw, Juno, and Dr. Volkova hesitated for just a moment, but Elena's command was final. They had one chance. She had to make sure they had enough time to destroy the weapon. As the team rushed forward, Elena squared off against the Supreme Commander, a grim resolve settling over her. She fought with everything she had, dodging his strikes, parrying his blows, but she knew the outcome. The commander was stronger, faster. It was only a matter of time before he overpowered her. But that's when she made her move. With a quick motion, she activated a small explosive device that had been planted on the weapon earlier. The team had planned for this, a fail-safe to destroy the device if it came down to this moment. Elena's heart raced as she activated the countdown. The explosion would destroy the weapon completely, ensuring it would never be used. She could hear the Supreme Commander's enraged roar as he lunged for the controls, but it was too late. With a deafening blast, the weapon erupted in a storm of fire and light, tearing itself apart from the inside out. The shockwave sent Elena flying, her vision blurring as the room spun around her. When the dust cleared, the weapon was gone, obliterated, but so was Elena. She had sacrificed herself to ensure its destruction, knowing that her death was the only way to guarantee the safety of the galaxy. The team rushed to her side, but the damage had been done. Elena's body lay still, her sacrifice marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of a long, uncertain road ahead. The Varthex had lost their weapon, but the war was just beginning. The Supreme Commander was not done, and the Echo was now the symbol of humanity's defiance. But Elena's team had done what no one thought possible. They had destroyed the weapon, and though Elena was gone, her legacy lived on. The Echo was barely hanging together. After the explosion that destroyed the Varthex weapon, the ship was damaged beyond repair. Its once sleek hull was now riddled with breaches, systems were offline, and its propulsion barely functioned. But despite the wreckage, the surviving crew managed to bring the ship into a decaying orbit, drifting silently through the vast expanse of space. The echoes of Elena's sacrifice still reverberated in their hearts, each crew member carrying the heavy weight of her loss. She had given everything to save them all, and now they were left to pick up the pieces, both physically and emotionally. As they drifted further from the Varthex moon, the reality of their success and its consequences settled in. The Varthex had been stopped from launching their devastating weapon, but the victory had come at a great cost. The Echo was crippled, Elena was gone, and the Varthex now knew humanity existed, knew that humanity was capable of great things. They had seen the might of a species they had once dismissed as insignificant, and though the Varthex might have been momentarily stunned, they would not forget the threat humanity had posed. There was no doubt that this was only the beginning of something far larger. The surviving crew members knew they could never go back to a quiet life of anonymity. The universe was a much more dangerous place now, and humanity had just made its mark on it. The journey back to Earth was long, filled with silence and reflection. The crew didn't speak much as they made the final approach. They were lost in their thoughts, some grieving, others replaying the events in their minds, wondering if they could have done something differently, if there was another way to have saved Elena. But as the Earth's atmosphere finally began to pull them in, they felt the familiar pull of home, the comfort of gravity beneath their feet. It was a bittersweet return. They had saved the galaxy from certain destruction, but they had lost one of their own in the process. Upon landing, the crew was immediately whisked away to a secure facility. High-ranking officials greeted them with a mixture of gratitude and caution. The Echo's findings were debriefed in closed rooms, every detail meticulously documented, every word weighed with the importance of the information they had gathered. Humanity had gained invaluable knowledge about the Varthex and their capabilities. More than that, the crew had learned about their own strength. It was clear now that Earth was no longer a bystander in the galaxy. They had shown they could stand toe-to-toe with one of the most advanced and powerful civilizations in existence. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. However, the Vartheks were far from defeated. Their defeat in the battle for the weapon was a blow, but it would not stop them. They would be back, and when they returned, they would bring their full fury. The higher-ups understood this all too well. The Echo crew's actions had paved the way for alliances with other species who had been watching from the shadows, hesitant to intervene. Now, with humanity's resilience and courage proven, a new network of partnerships would form, but it wouldn't be easy. The Vartheks threat still loomed large, and every force in the galaxy would have to prepare for what was to come. As the debriefing concluded, the surviving crew members of the Echo stood together, looking at the vast, endless expanse of space through the windows of the facility. There was a long road ahead, one filled with uncertainty. The Vartheks had seen humanity's strength, but so had many others. New challenges would come, and humanity would need to evolve, adapt, and prepare for an uncertain future. Yet, there was also a sense of hope, a spark of determination that had not been there before. They had proven that humanity, once underestimated, had the will and the ability to survive. They had defied the odds, stopped an unstoppable force, and given their species a place in the galactic stage. In the end, the universe had changed. No longer was Earth an obscure world on the edge of the galaxy. They had shown that they could rise, they could fight, and they would not be intimidated. And while the future remained unclear, one thing was certain: humanity's story was far from over. The Vartheks would return, and other threats would emerge, but humanity would be ready. Elena's sacrifice, the crew's bravery, and the lessons they had learned would guide them forward into this new and uncertain chapter of history. The Echo may have been broken, but the spirit of its crew, and the fire of humanity, was very much alive.